Let me know if I get too far or too close to the mic. Just yell at me or something. Okay, so John Chrysostom. You have certainly, if you've been Orthodox for any length of time, you've heard of John Chrysostom. Like Father said, he's the author of the Divine Liturgy, or at least like the skeleton of it. There was other church writers who contributed to the Divine Liturgy. The Divine Liturgy bears his name, at least the one that we celebrate for most of the year. And he's mentioned in every Divine Liturgy. So I'm just going to give a summary of his life. It's really quite a condensed version of the presentation I gave in history class. So there's going to be a lot of material on the slides that I won't be covering. So just don't be confused about that. Okay, so before I get into the life of John Chrysostom, I'm going to have to give some background about the setting, the religious setting, the political setting of his life. He was born into the late Roman Empire. Now, the late Roman Empire, this is not the Roman Empire that you are probably thinking of. These are not toga-wearing pagans. By now, paganism is really on the decline, and Christianity is on the ascendancy. Christianity has not yet been made the state religion of the empire, but it's been largely endorsed by the Roman state. Here's a representation of Saint Constantine. He was the one who legalized Christianity. Christianity, for the first several centuries of its existence, was severely persecuted by the Roman government and by the Jewish religious leaders. But Saint Constantine the Great, he converted to Christianity in his latter days, but prior to that, he legalized Christianity at the famous Edict of Milan, and he went further than that. He actually convened the first ecumenical council, the Council of Nicaea I, which took care of, largely, a massive theological controversy that was going on in Christianity at the time called the Arian crisis. And after this, as Christianity became more and more important in Roman politics, Christian writers, they started to see the Roman Empire as a kind of icon or representation of Christ's heavenly kingdom on earth. And as a consequence, the Roman emperor began to kind of take up a role similar to King David. He became kind of a representative of Christ on earth in a way, in a diminished fashion, of course. So here's a little word about the structure of the Orthodox Church. Now I want to note that I'm going to call it the Orthodox Church because we're all Orthodox here, but the Nestorians, the Miaphysites, and the Roman Catholics had not yet broken away from the Orthodox Church. And so they all recognize John Chrysostom as a saint. They all trace their lineage back to this one undivided church, despite the fact that, as Orthodox we believe they're in schism. But a word about the structure of the Orthodox Church. So the Orthodox Church is it's made up of the bishops and the priests, deacons, and the congregations that they oversee. But not all bishops have the same authority. There are bishops who have customary privileges that set them apart from the other bishops. There are 5 that are preeminent among these special bishoprics, and they are the sees, the bishoprics of Rome, Constantinople, Alexandria, Antioch, and Jerusalem. These bishoprics are considered to have greater authority because they are what are called apostolic sees, which means that they were directly founded by one of the apostles. Here's a map. It's the same map from before, but circled in red are the various apostolic sees, or more specifically, the apostolic sees that make up the Pentarchy, the 5 most most powerful bishops in the Orthodox Church. What is modern-day Turkey meets the Balkans is Constantinople. That's where the ecumenical archbishop or ecumenical patriarch lives. South of the Anatolian Peninsula, what is modern-day Turkey, is Antioch. That's the place of John Chrysostom's birth. And in the far south in Egypt is Alexandria. Those are the three C's that I'm going to be talking about the most today. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Antioch now. Antioch at this time in the late Roman Empire is a very important city. It sits on top of very important trade routes to the Far East, China and other places. It's the administrative headquarters of the Roman Empire's easternmost frontier. And, of course, it's the dwelling place of the Archbishop of Antioch. You may know him as the Patriarch of Antioch, but the word Patriarch isn't used as much during this time period, so I'm going to refer to him as the Archbishop. So, now I'm going to get into the life of St. John Chrysostom. So, John Chrysostom was born in 349 AD. We know that his mother was a Christian. We don't know the religion of his father, but his father was definitely an important person in Antioch. He was the Magister Militum of the East, which is kind of like a governor, essentially. At a young age, John was sent to school. John was sent to school under the pagan order Libanius. He graduated at the age of 18 in 367 AD, and he was baptized by the Archbishop Meletius. He's the Archbishop of Antioch. Upon his baptism, he joined an asceterion, which is kind of it's like a primitive monastery. Organized monasticism hadn't reached this part of the empire yet, but it was essentially a monastery. And this monastery was overseen by the priest Diodore, who was the future bishop of Tarsus. He would actually play a really important role in another theological controversy years later, at least his writings would. So that's interesting to know. In 371, John was tonsured a reader by Archbishop Meletius. But shortly after that, Meletius was exiled to Armenia, which kicked off the Meletian Schism, which was this horrible schism that lasted in the Orthodox Church for many years, but was eventually resolved, fortunately. John's asceticism in this asceterion was so extreme. Wait, hold on. Yeah. Hold on a second. Oh, yes, that's right. Okay. His asceticism in this asceterion was so extreme that he actually damaged his kidneys and stomach. It's not clear whether this is the reason that he returned to Antioch, or whether it was rumors that Meletius might be returning from exile. But in any case, he did return to Antioch after some time, and Meletius did return as well. But he had to be called off to the Second Ecumenical Council, the Council of Constantinople I. And he died there, Meletius did. Shortly after, John was ordained as a priest by Meletius' successor, Archbishop Flavian. It is around this time that John received the name of Chrysostom. Chrysostom is not a last name, it's a nickname, and it means golden-mouthed one. This was because he was so eloquent. Remember, he was trained under the order Libanius. John preached a lot during this time period, and we have quite a lot of his sermons. We have 900 of his sermons, and most of them do come from this 12-year period he spent in Antioch as a priest under Archbishop Flavian. In 397, Nectarios, the Archbishop of Constantinople, died. There were numerous factions who were vying for power, who would succeed Nectarios. And things got so intense, so heated, that the court eunuch Eutropius recommended that an outsider, John Chrysostom, be brought to Constantinople and made the archbishop. He was an outsider of, Constantinopolitan internal church politics, so he wasn't going to be carrying all that baggage. And so he was chosen to be the archbishop in absentia without him even knowing, and he was actually forcibly kidnapped from Antioch and brought to Constantinople. He was consecrated as the Archbishop of Constantinople in 398. So, all in all, his time as Archbishop of Constantinople, at least the first several years, went fine, but he eventually began to create some enemies, and the main reason for this was because he deeply valued asceticism, fasting, self-denial, giving to the poor, and many of the clergy and other people in Constantinople, they did not live up to the ascetic requirements of Christianity. Many of them were extremely rich and decadent, just not befitting of a priest to be so wealthy and to withhold so much wealth from the poor. So he criticized this, and because of that, he made some enemies, because these decadent clergymen, they feared that their lifestyles might be compromised by John. So I'm going to have to give some more background. So in Alexandria, this was years before Chrysostom, there was this fellow by the name of Origen, and he was an extremely influential early church theologian. But he, back up a second, actually. So Alexandria had always thought of itself as the principal see in the East, even more so than Constantinople. But at the Second Ecumenical Council, the Council of Constantinople I, Constantinople was made the principal see in the East, and Alexandria, the See of Alexandria, they had not quite accepted that reality yet. And Rome had not kind of agreed with Alexandria at this point. Okay, so back to Origen. Origen was this very influential early church theologian, but he had some odd viewpoints. He believed in the pre-existence of the soul. He believed that all rational natures had in some way existed forever in God, or something like this. He believed that all creatures would eventually find salvation, perhaps even the devil himself. And so there was some hesitance about those points of his theology. But he had died and quite some time before, but his writings were still circulating, and there were still followers of him, Origenists, in Alexandria. And the Archbishop of Alexandria, Theophilus, he made it his project to eliminate this Origenist, residue in Alexandria. And so he started attacking a large community of Origenists in the Nitrian desert of Egypt. He, disbanded their communities and stuff. And two of these Origenist monks from the Nitrian desert did flee to Constantinople and made an appeal to John Chrysostom. So Chrysostom invited Archbishop Theophilus to come to Constantinople and basically be tried for, what he had been doing, being so aggressive toward these Nitrian monks. But as I was talking about earlier, he had made some enemies in the court of Constantinople. And so instead of him being the president of a tribunal overseeing, and judging Archbishop Theophilus, what instead occurred was he was tried, John Chrysostom was tried by, the Archbishop of Alexandria, and he was found to be guilty of harboring these Nitrian monks, and he was deposed. But the people who were acquainted, I'm talking about the commoners, they were acquainted with John Chrysostom, and they loved him. They knew he was a righteous man, and they knew that this was persecution that was unjust. And so they began to riot, and it got so bad that John Chrysostom was actually reinstated as archbishop. Well, eventually what happened is John Chrysostom, not really sure where I am in the slides, but I'll just improvise from now on. John Chrysostom, he gave a sermon condemning Empress Eudoxia because she had erected a statue of herself made of precious stone in very vain fashion. There was no good reason for this. She was an extremely vain woman, and he condemned her in a sermon, and comparing her to the Princess Herodias in the New Testament. And if you know the story about that, Herodias was the princess who manipulated the Tetrarch of Judea into actually executing John the Baptist. So this comparison really offended Empress Eudoxia, and she took that rage, and she persecuted John Chrysostom even after he was reinstated. So basically what happened is he was allowed to be the archbishop, but he wasn't allowed to perform Pascha, he wasn't allowed to baptize, and so he effectively wasn't able to do his duties as archbishop. But so what he did is he disobeyed the empress, the emperor, and he did attempt to baptize people in a different location. But imperial troops were sent to shut down the event, and this resulted in a violent clash between these groups, and this was used by the Emperor Arcadius, Empress Eudoxia, as an excuse to exile John Chrysostom, and that is what they did. He was exiled, and he was brought to, I think, seven different cities, 7 different locations. Eventually, he was going to be sent to Picus, which is this coastal city in what is now the country of Georgia, 700 miles from Constantinople. But the road was so hard that John Chrysostom died along the route. So he was, after this, what essentially was a martyrdom of sorts. He's considered a bishop confessor because of this incident. John Chrysostom was quickly declared a saint, rightly so, and he has contributed an enormous amount to the Orthodox Church in the way of writing, in the way of sermons. Like Father said, he's the author of much of the Divine Liturgy. I guess that'll wrap it up. Any questions?
This was great. Thank you.
Thank you.